Okay, to make the lids, once again, I don't like to use measurements at this point because if anything else has changed by just a little bit, it won't fit right. So a custom lid needs to go on top of here, but have a little bit of room to move, right? This wood could swell, a little bit of room. 1/8 of an inch on either side of every side is what I prefer, so that the lid fits nicely and snug, but has a little bit of give for swelling. So instead of taking a measurement, now that I've got my box assembled, I'm gonna go ahead and take this measurement. All right, that's 20 and 9/16. And then the width, that's 8 and 6/16, or 3/8. I'm gonna add 1/4 of an inch, so 1/8 inch on either end to those measurements to create the internal diameter of this frame. All right, so that's what I'm gonna do here. This distance plus 1/4 inch, this distance plus 1/4 inch to give the interior diameter of these frame pieces, and I'm gonna go cut this out of 1.5 inch scrap. Okay, I've cut my frame pieces and I've cut them down to size, but just to show you how I do this again. So the full length piece goes here with 1/8 of an inch on either end, and then the end pieces go long ways. You could do it the other way, you just gotta get your measurements right based on your wood, but when this is glued up, you should have 1/8 of an inch all the way around with an inner radius. Let me show you how I do this glue up. If you guys were really watching, you saw me make that mistake. Okay, so that is glued up and tacked up. Now, I will make a point that it is not perfectly square at the moment, and I will show you why. Because when I put my planks on top of here, this is the time to square it up. And I also do this at the moment in order to cut these planks up. So I've got these just pre-trimmed down, but I'm gonna go ahead and make my final measurements and cut these up. We'll be right back. Okay, last little cut here is done. This is where you square up your frame. All right, first piece on here. Now, this is where you square it up because that piece is on there and it looks like it's pretty square naturally just from my glue up. All right, and there is our lid. Quick wipe up of the excess glue. Now, this lid will need to be painted and covered. The most important part is that a little bit of room. Yeah, back and forth, back and forth. It's a little bit tight side to side. Should have a full 1/8 inch, but I think my wood's bowing just a little bit. Now, I'm gonna cover this with aluminum after I paint it, and then I will show you the next step. All right, YouTube, I'm back on the next morning. So I did some painting of our lids so that the water will be sealed in here. And the next step is to add some aluminum sheathing to the top just to make the weathering and the water to keep it from rotting the wood. It'll just make it last a lot longer. Everything I've done in the past without putting aluminum on top just wore a lot differently. So with a telescoping cover, I prefer to do aluminum sheathing. Now, the way I do this is you get some flashing here, and obviously the flashing needs to be wider and longer than your piece. You don't want to do folds if you can avoid it because water will find its way in there. And I add about 1.5 inches fold over on all 4 sides. So I've measured this out. I've got a couple marks here, and I've got a square. And I just use a razor knife to score and basically cut this aluminum on a mat here. And it should work out okay. Let's see how this works. All right. Usually, after you score it, you can just kind of bend it. Now, be careful if you do this. You can cut yourself pretty badly. Gloves might be advised if you haven't done this before, just acknowledge that the edges are sharp. As you can hear, I'm making a little bit of noise. Okay, there's my piece of cut metal. And I'll just kind of set this on top so you can kind of see how it's gonna go. We do have a little bit of bending to do here, a little bit of stapling. Let me get my staple gun, I'll be right back and show you how I do this. All right, I decided to bring you up on the deck and give you a little bit better perspective of what I'm doing. So, if you remember, I added 1.5 inches on the outside edge of this. I've got a square here, and this end of the square is 1.5 inches wide. So to get the initial bend on this metal, obviously you need to kind of choose which side you want down. I'm gonna go ahead, because I got a little bit of glue on here, I'm gonna go ahead and use this. I'm just gonna lean my square over this end, line it up so I've got about 1.5 inches, and now I'm just gonna give a pre-bend here. This pre-bend is gonna be very helpful. I'm gonna do the same on the other end. Get my 1.5 inches pre-bent on there. And actually, with one bend, just so you don't end up with an extra, you should probably go ahead and use your box to bend the second one. That way, if it's just a little bit off, you're not gonna get it short there. See how, just go ahead and tighten that up, get that pre-bend on there. Exactly. All right, and once that is on there, and see that is not perfectly square, which is fine as long as it goes over it, but that's why I didn't want to pre-bend that second end, because if I didn't cut my aluminum perfectly square, I have one other trick I'm going to show you. So this other trick I was going to show you is once you've got your metal on here, kind of like wrestling a monkey, you can go ahead and use a mallet to help make that crease like you want. All right. Now, upside down, you can see it a little bit better how it's going to be centered on there. I use T50 flat staples to nail this down. And of course, getting this on here, now the reason I use these flat staples instead of the perhaps crown staples is because the flat nature of the T50s holds this and doesn't go through the metal as much. Okay, now I can work with this a little bit better. I'm gonna staple up here some more. Now the corners are tricky. The best way I've found to do the corners is to get the middle edges down, and they will find themselves a natural bend and you can continue it. You don't really want to cut that metal, because if you cut that metal, you're going to create a spot for water to get in. So you'd rather bend it over and fold it. Now, getting this just right and starting in the middle, the further you go along, the easier this is going to get. All right, now that's getting close. All right, so now, see these little folded leaves? They're nice. They can go either way you want, but basically what you want to do, and I've got another tool, let me show you. All right, I went and got another tool. You don't need this to do this job, but this is a crimper, and it makes this metal nice, tight, and flat. And if you see here, if I'm gonna make this joint nice and square, having ability of making that nice and flat, better than your fingers can do, is helpful. So see how I've got that nice and flat? So now all I need to do is bend this dog ear over to one side or the other and staple it. Now remember, the lower your staples are, the lower the holes that go into the wood are. So avoid stapling up high and creating little entry points, because theoretically once you staple it in there, you've created an entry point for the water. This is not a required tool. You could do this with your fingers, pliers if you were careful. Okay, now it's just time to make sure I've got staples everywhere, about every 3 or 4 inches. And that is how I cover my lids with aluminum. Hopefully that was easy to understand and follow. Let me knock out a few more.